Welcome everyone to Unscripted Coding. Today we're going to talk through Figma. Now Figma is a UI mockup tool. That means that you can design the look and the feel of your apps, your websites, even documents, and map out how you flow through each of those and the look and the feel. Now, it's not meant to create the app. You're not going to code all of the logic, all of the interactions, all of those pieces, but it's meant for you to be able to make it look good and be able to keep components consistent across the board. So if you have, say, a very stylized slider button like this one, quite unique to your app, at least the design, you can carry it through multiple screens and mock up how your application would look like. Now, I've never really used Figma before because I am somebody who believes in paper mockups. Maybe I'll find a better one than that. But I used to do a lot on paper. You would just draw it out, get the general layout. Like, UI is very important. Having things laid out that makes sense, that's pretty, that's good. But you can see color has never made much of a difference. I have not really gone in and said the border needs to be 3 pixels wide, or the corners need to be rounded to however many radius points. That hasn't really mattered. For me, I had just said I need a header, a footer, maybe a sidebar, maybe a pop-up menu, and even worse is that I would just use Bootstrap for so much of it. Bootstrap is a framework that gives you ready-to-use buttons, sliders, headers, footers, sidebars, all of those things packaged, ready to go. So as somebody who doesn't think a lot about design, it's very easy for me to say, I got the general gist of what I want, and Bootstrap will make it look not terrible, maybe even good. But if you want something truly unique, truly eye-catching, generally you gotta have somebody design it, you gotta carry it out, all of those things. And if you've watched this channel for a while, my creative side is not exactly great. So, I decided to play around a little bit with Figma because everybody uses Figma. I've seen so many of my colleagues use Figma. There's a few other alternatives out there, but I started trying to put this together, just a header and a footer, and I realized this isn't really for me. So, I wanted to talk through what I saw very briefly in my experiment with Figma and why, it may not be necessary for people like me who don't really spend that much time on design. It's important and it's a really useful tool for your designers, but it's quite powerful. So first things first, when I opened this blank page, I was trying to find components, assets that I could start just using. Generic looking buttons, links, text, whatever, and none of that was available. So what I had to do was find other kits in the community, and it wasn't immediately obvious how you actually bring these components in. But what I found was you could just, across tabs, say copy this one, copy, and then you could paste. And you would have your button here. Now, what frustrated me, if you can see here and here, is that the components that other people design clearly aren't tailored, aren't meant for interactions with each other. So when I take a look at this one and I try to drag it out to the right size, let's take this card instead. See, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. when I drag it out, some of the text isn't quite matching. Some of the sizes aren't scaling. You can see this button right here that the X is locked in size too. So clearly they intended for the button to stay rather small. And now if I'm designing for, say, an iPhone XS versus, a very tiny portable phone or even a computer monitor, these buttons aren't great and easy to move across. So what I'm realizing is you have to design your own components and figure out what size you want to use and figure out what you want to use. Now, granted, you can start with somebody else's components and maybe modify them, but maybe I was just missing the entire point. I am missing the entire point of Figma. You want to create a very unique, stylized look for your application. What I was hoping for more so is these generic components I can throw together so that I can figure out very quickly, a layout like this one, so that I know I want 3 sections, I want, say, a header and a footer, and then start modifying. And to me, what's becoming more and more obvious to me is that maybe my old approach just works. Maybe I don't need a design system because I'm not a designer, and the colors, all of these minutiae are not the most important in my priority. That's different for everyone, of course, but for me, I just want to get out an app that looks decent and not embarrassing. So for me, I'm thinking about just going back to Bootstrap. You get the footer, you get the header, and yeah, they have these weird colors. So let me show you Bootstrap buttons. Bootstrap has a number of colors ready to go, and the idea is they should look decent and they should represent common ideas. So success is green, danger is red, that's not surprising. And then once you get the general look, you have your header, you have your footer, you have 3 buttons, and you have a form stacked together. That's what I want to get at a prototype. And as I want to start making the design work better and easier, you start modifying these, because you can override these designs. So if I can go in and change this to a black color, okay, that is a white color. What am I doing? But you can start changing these things very directly through CSS. You can customize it. Bootstrap, there are all sorts of ways for you to create and extend all of these things. And you can override your CSS in specific areas. And the same is true for most applications. Like Flutter is my go-to for building apps. They have material design and some of the iOS components just ready to go in their library. You just put a button and you can start using those components right away. And then once you get something working, you can start customizing. And for me, that makes a lot of sense because I'm so comfortable with building web pages, apps. I'm very uncomfortable with trying to design something from scratch. So it makes sense for me to go, let's build something functional and workable first and start tweaking the design over time. Obviously, there are many that would flip the process. It's quicker, cheaper, easier to design than to write code for certain people. So all in all, I started trying to get this working, and I decided it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I'll tell you why I was drawn to this initially. I was looking at FlutLab, which is an IDE for Flutter that's all online. It seems very interesting, but I saw this, a Figma to Flutter converter. Basically, it would take what you've built in Flutter and in Figma and convert it to Flutter. Now, obviously, you strip out. You have no logic, no rules, none of that. You just have the general design. And I thought, whoa, that's pretty interesting. I'm rethinking that now because it was such a struggle for me, and I understand it might not be a struggle once you get used to it, once you use it a lot, but it's such a struggle for me that I actually think it's easier for me to write the code, the Flutter code, and change the color and change the design on the code rather than in Figma. Now, granted, the big difference is in Figma, I'm sure you are thinking about all of these minute changes, the borders, the dotted or dashed borders, you have fill, stroke, you have all of these little design choices you can make. But in Flutter, you're getting the scaffolding ready, and that's it. You might change a few major colors, and that's it. So all in all, prior to this video, I was trying to build a bit on Flutter, and I just hit into a wall over and over. And it at the end, it just doesn't fit my workflow. So, long story short, I wanted to show you guys Figma doesn't work the way I thought it did, that there's just components ready to go that you can just move, resize, all of these things. It's a little more complicated and more unintuitive than I thought. So try it out. It's free to do your first project. You can have one project, I think, for free. You might be able to work with multiple team members, all for free. So it's definitely worth trying. And I think for other people, it might even be a great tool. But I thought I'd just share my experience so far. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. Leave a comment, thumbs up. If you didn't, also leave a comment. I will see you next week.